All right, it's good to be here with you this morning. I'm not used to being here on a Wednesday morning, with you folks, but it sure is good to be here with you today. Are you folks doing all right? Yes, okay. Some of you were able to say yes, the others just shook their heads. All right. So it's good to see you out here for these morning sessions that you're having. And so I was asked to speak today, and then I'm on schedule to speak one more time. Unless I blow it today, they say that second opportunity may be axed if I don't do it good today. So anyway, I've got something that I want to start talking about today, and depending on how far we go, we may continue the theme a month from now when I'm back with you, or if I finish it today, we'll obviously deal with another theme. But I am going to be dealing with missions. Most of you know that I direct a missionary organization named Global Faith Mission Agency, and every day of the week, every week of the year, I'm involved with or impacted by with missionaries and with missions. And so it's not just a once a week thing for me. It impacts every day that I live as we have communication from missionaries or from mission fields asking for prayer, asking for advice, or informing us of victories, maybe informing us of difficulties. And I enjoy being involved in missions. I'm a second-generation missionary, and so from the time that I've been 9 years old, I've been around missions all my life, and I enjoy it. I love missions for many, many reasons, obviously because that's what God's put in my heart. But I enjoy the diversity that we have in missions. For example, in Global Faith, we have missionaries that work in remote areas, in villages, and small places, and we have missionaries that work in metropolitan areas with millions and millions of people in population. It's the same gospel that reaches out to all those people, but, when you go from a village of just 60 people to a city of 13 million people, sometimes your strategy, your methodology changes. You're preaching the same message because you're looking for the same results, for sinners to be saved, for Christians to be edified, for churches to be established. And so we have this common message, and yet our outreach is so different. And that's one thing I enjoy about my work. It doesn't get monotonous, I should say. It doesn't get boring, at least to me it doesn't. And so I enjoy the diversity of it. Somebody was telling me the other day, they said, Roy, I don't think I've ever seen you have a bad day. Well, I'm going to have to disappoint you if you believe that. I do have bad days. And I guess sometimes maybe Edie's the only one that sees or hears about my challenges I have or my discouraging times. And I think my personality, for the most part, I'm a positive guy, I'm an upbeat guy, but there are discouraging things that happens in missions, but they never offset the wonderful things that are happening in missions, amen? And so we praise the Lord for that. We got an email yesterday from Steve Trexler, 71 years old, or 72 now, and Steve has been in Liberia, Africa for a long time. He was a PA, a physician's assistant, before he ever went to the mission field. And he's been used of the Lord in Liberia to start a PA school, the only physician assistant school in the country of Liberia. And it's been a wonderful outreach for him. He's also involved in church planning and a very, very busy guy. Steve Trexler didn't get married till 3 years ago, had never been married in his life. And he came home on furlough, and he was at his home church. And there was a couple that he'd known for years in the church, and the husband had passed away, and he saw Jeananne is her name, and she was a widow now, and one thing led to another. And I remember he called me. He was 68 years old or 69 when he called me. He said, Brother Roy, he said, I need your permission to get married. He was home on furlough, and I said, you don't need my permission to get married. I think you're old enough to make your own decision. He said, well, I'm with a mission board, and I just need to have permission. I said, go for it. I said, you've got my permission. And she amazed me because I was saying, how in the world, because she's a year older than him, and she's lived here in the United States all her life, and how in the world is this woman at 70 years of age going to go to Liberia for the first time and live there as a missionary? But she did, and they've had a wonderful time. They are at the place now where they are going to retire in the very near future. But they emailed us yesterday and said, Brother Roy, we need your prayers and we need some help. They have a very healthy account. Finance was not the problem, but it was the problem in that they had a considerable amount of money that was stolen. Because of the ministry they do, the PA school, training the medical students, and its operation, plus the church planting ministries, they keep a strong amount of cash on hand because not everybody has the ability to cash a check if they are paying things with checks. So he said on Sundays when we go to church, we have a paid guard that watches our house, but he got sick on Sunday and left, and we were robbed, and we lost $6,000 plus other supplies. And so we, of course, were, the Lord's blessed his account. It's healthy, so we were able to send that money to him. But you just feel bad for somebody that's doing everything they can to serve God and that country that has so many needs. 7 years ago when the Ebola crisis was going on strong, I mean, he saved a lot of lives just by being involved with people in the Ebola crisis, and now the COVID thing. And you just say, how in the world can people be so evil and so bad to go in? And here's a guy that's helping your people, your country, and you go and you steal from him. But that's human nature, and that's the very reason why we're involved in missions, because people need Jesus. And the fact of the matter is, if it wasn't for the presence of the Lord in our lives, there's no way of knowing how deep we would sink into sin and depravity, but for the Lord being in our lives and being our Savior. So, helped him out yesterday. We were able to wire some money to him immediately to help him with the ability to go ahead and pay the bills that they have right now. And then, so we get things like that on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis. And right before I came over here today, Bridget Barrett, works in our office. She came to say, just before you leave, we need to catch up on this and this and this and this. And, we were able to take care of these things. And then she's such a organized lady. She began to look at her watch because I'd already told her I needed to leave at a certain time. She said, it's time for you to go. I don't think she was getting rid of me, but she's being good for me. She said, it's time for you to go if you're going to make your meeting. So we enjoy our work. Now, here's what I want to do today. I want to talk to you about some of the trends that are going on in missions. And just as in any other thing in the world, there are trends that occur. Some of these trends can be healthy, some of them can be positive, and some of them may have a negative side to them. But I'm going to present to you some trends that are going on in missions. When we go back to the first century church, and when we go back to the time right before the ascension, when Jesus gave the Great Commission to the church, there was a missionary movement that starts there in the book of Acts. In Acts 1:8, he gives that Great Commission to the church, and then he ascends into heaven, and the church at that point moves on. He told them that they were to evangelize Jerusalem, where they were, to reach out to Judea and to Samaria and the uttermost parts of the world. For the first 6 chapters, the church stays in Jerusalem. There is no Judea, Samaria, and uttermost part of the world in their outreach. And so the Lord kind of kicks them in the pants, the seat of the pants to get them started. And from chapter 7 on, because of persecution, there is now a missionary movement out to Judea and Samaria. But that was forced on them because of persecution. And just lets us know that God, when he wants his will and his way to be done, he'll do whatever it needs to be done to kick us into action. And so he used persecution to get the church going. And by the time we get to Acts chapter 11 and 12 and 13, there's a missionary movement that's active in reaching other areas of the world. By the time we get to Acts 13, for the first time in the scriptures, we find a church, the Church of Antioch, that has an intentional missionary outreach. And they send out Barnabas and they send out Saul. That's the first time in the scriptures we find an intentional missionary outreach. We're sending you to be missionaries. Up to then, from Acts 6 or 7 on to Acts 13, it was, they were kicked into gear, because of the persecution. And so God's plan takes place one way or the other. Now, we want to be like that church of Antioch, and we want to be intentional in what we do, and we want to be right in what we do. So let me talk to you about some things that are trends in missions today. And Many of these trends you're already involved with. You may not know it. So we'll go to current trend, the first trend that we want to mention, and that is in today's world, we're seeing a lot more partnership with foreign personnel. And to me, this is an extremely healthy missionary trend. And we are seeing more and more foreign people called of God to be involved in missions, to the extent that the experts that take the statistics in mission work going on around the world, not just what the Church of the United States of America is doing, but the entire world, we are no longer the largest sending missionary unit. There are many countries now where missionaries are going out on their own, from their own countries, from their own churches. And many of them, amazingly, are going out from third world countries that have restricted financial resources. But you know what? They have the calling of God on their lives. They have the power of God on their life. And the power of the Holy Spirit to enable us to do missions is not throttled back because of a lack of dollars. God's work will be done in God's way if we step out and obey. And so it's neat to see what is going on. I got an email yesterday. I got the one from Liberia. Okay, we helped Steve Trexler with that money need they have because of the money that need to be replaced. Got another email. A young man in Russia answered the call to be a missionary. And so think about it. Here's a country that just less than a generation ago was steeped in communism, and now we have people over there that have grown in the Lord, matured in their faith, and they're answering the call to go to their mission field. And you know what? When we partner with nationals, foreign personnel, many times we can be a step ahead of the game. Now, that does not diminish the importance and the value of sending our own people to be missionaries. For example, a lot of the Russian believers are able to get into Siberia a whole lot easier than we can. They can get into Siberia to be missionaries because they are used to the weather. In case you don't know, Siberia is a little bit on the chilly side. It is extremely cold over there. And so they are used to that. And then not only that, they're accepted because of their ethnic features. They're widely accepted. Sometimes when we look so different from somebody else, it raises questions, it raises doubts. And those things are normal. And so a foreign missionary can be effective in those areas, but it takes time to learn the language and to culturally adapt. So when foreigners answer the call to missions, many times they're able to go to their respective fields around their area, and they are more readily and more quickly involved in the ministry of God's work. I remember the first time I ever went to Cuba, and I stayed with Pablo Marchante, a pastor, in his house, and was there for the time of ministry there, and I was preaching in these churches. And what a need, but what an opportunity. And several years ago, a lot of American churches were wanting to get American missionaries into Cuba. We still can't do it in the way that we are used to doing things. In fact, Cuba is coming back with a lot of their restrictions right now. And so, and in case you don't know it, there's a lot of protesting going on in Cuba right now. I was talking with a Cuban couple last night, and they said, well, what you folks are not seeing is that a lot of the protesters are being incarcerated, and we don't even know where some of them are now. They've been taken off. So pray for the church in Cuba. But based on that trip to Cuba, and there was a high interest in churches here in sending missionaries from the United States to Cuba, I realized that the best way to reach Cuba with missionaries was not from the United States of America, but with missionaries from countries like Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico, because all of those countries still maintain diplomatic relationships with Cuba. We don't. We have limited diplomatic relationships with Cuba. On top of that, when an American steps off the plane, there is a very aggressive tourism industry that goes on in Cuba. I saw that firsthand. I mean, they've got some beautiful hotels. The nightclubs is the big drawing card. That and gambling and other illicit behavior. But the tourists stay in their protected area, and they eat well, they sleep well, they live well while they're there. But it's the Cuban people that live in a different situation, and their plight is very great. But I realize that when an American steps off the plane, he's viewed as that foreigner that comes to leave dollars, and he's a capitalist, we're communists. It's when the Brazilian or the Venezuelan or the Colombian or the Argentine missionary goes over there that they don't stand out as much, and they're able to get over some of the obstacles and hindrances that an American missionary would have. So the partnership that we have with foreign personnel is a very positive trend in missions, and one that will continue to grow. And so the partnership that you could have with a foreign missionary can be a very positive one. Now, sometimes there are logistical issues dealing with getting the financial support to somebody in particular areas of the world, but we can achieve that with the right amount of effort. And so we're excited about this. The partnership with foreign personnel continues to increase. And for one thing, our American volunteers going into career missions is also diminishing in many areas. So this is necessary. Number two, let's go to another trend, and that's what we call mobility in missions. For many years, the traditional missionary movement took place this way. John Doe, the missionary, says he's going to the country of Bolivia, and he goes to Bolivia, and he stays in this one area his entire ministry. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. For one thing, there's a lot that needs to be done in that area. But the biblical model of missions in Acts, where Barnabas, then Paul, then Silas, and others began to go on in this missionary movement, is that it was an extremely mobile enterprise. They did not stay in one place that long. They stayed long enough to see the church established and some type of leadership entrenched there, and then they would quickly move on to another area to start other ministries. Today, we are seeing a trend that's trending back towards greater mobility in missions. There are areas of the world that actually facilitate this. For example, if we go to Latin America, and let's go to South America. South America. Almost every South American country speaks Spanish as their native language. Brazil, the largest country, speaks Portuguese. So that's a different animal. Although Portuguese and Spanish-speaking people can understand roughly 60%, 50-60% of what each other are saying, because there's some similarities and common roots there in the linguistic makeup of Portuguese and Spanish. Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, on and on. Those countries all speak Spanish. Brazil, they speak Portuguese. Then we get to three little countries that are nestled between Brazil and Venezuela on the coast. And those are the countries of Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. And those three countries, Guyana, English is widely spoken. French Guiana, guess what? French, that's widely spoken. In Suriname, they speak Dutch. And then the Indian tribes, the indigenous people, speak their native languages. Everything else in South America, you speak Spanish. So a missionary could go and spend 20, 30 years of his ministry in Ecuador, but as opportunities arise for other ministries in other countries, he could travel from Ecuador to Peru, to Colombia, to Chile, to Uruguay, and minister there because he already knows the language. And you've got a case where that's going on right now from your church, and that's Russ Turner. Russ has been in Costa Rica now for over 40 years and been involved in extensive church planting opportunities in Costa Rica. But after 40 some odd years of being where he is and at the stage of ministry he is, a lot of his effort now is involved with pastoral training, leadership training. And so he's not only ministering in Costa Rica, but he ministers in Panama, he ministers in Colombia, He ministers in some areas of Peru. And why can he do that? Because he knows a language that's commonly spoken. So in areas of the world where that happens, we have the opportunity for increased mobility that allows somebody to reach many other areas, because today we have the ability to travel by air. And that helps that. If we were back in the day of the Apostle Paul, you'd have to walk. And I say that because in spite of the fact that they walked everywhere or sometimes took a ship to get to the other side of wherever they were traveling, they were still extremely mobile. So in today's world, with air travel the way it is, we have the opportunity to be in other places very quickly. I remember when I used to travel into Central America a lot with my former mission agency, I could go speak in Guatemala, be there for a 3-day conference, get on the plane, be in Honduras in about an hour, and be there for a 3-day conference. Same language. And so, you can do this in these areas. So we're seeing a great deal of mobility in missions. One thing there, it's easier for the veteran like Russ, who's been on the field for 40 years, to do that mobility. It's easier for him to do it than the new guy. The new guy is still learning the cultural distinctives, still getting the language down. So a lot of times this mobility in missions comes a little bit later in life. Let's go to trend number 3. This is a very important trend, I think, but we are becoming much more aware now of our own spiritual needs in the United States of America. I think sometimes the church in America, we are so used to being the missionary sending agent for the last many, many decades. We still have a hard time of viewing ourselves as a mission field. But when Jesus gave the Great Commission, he told the believers that were around Jerusalem, he said, you start in Jerusalem, you go to Judea, Samaria, the uttermost part of the world. But all of those areas were just as important as each other. Judea was just as important as the uttermost part of the world, and vice versa. Our country has changed a lot in our lifetime. Our country, our culture, our society has changed dramatically in our lifetime. Some of it is for good, and not all of it, though, is for good, though, is it? And so we need to realize, and I'm looking at a group here except for a young fellow back there, and I think a young man may be in the tech booth. Everybody else, we're up in a different category of life now. We're a little bit older, okay? And if we think that our young people are just as biblically literate, and I'm talking in general sense now, if the young people of our society are as biblically literate as you were at their age, you're probably greatly mistaken. Because we have a whole generation of young people that when they hear the name of God, it's not in the context of a Bible message. It's in the context of somebody on the street taking God's name in vain. Same thing with the name Jesus. We have a whole generation of young people in our country that don't know anything about God's love, heaven or hell, the consequences of sin. They don't know anything about that. And our country has become just as important a mission field as any other place out there. We need very much to focus on our youth and the generation that's coming up behind us. I so appreciate what Mickey Rector is doing with your young people here at Mile Straight Baptist Church. And the emphasis, in fact, I think there's a group of young people on a trip right now, aren't they? Or they were the other day, I guess. A few days ago, they were on a ministry trip. So there's just a lot that we need to do to reach our own children with the gospel message. Let's quickly, we could spend a lot of time on that, but I'm going to go on. Number 4, another trend that's affecting us, although Americans are not aware of this, is there has to be an awareness of a changing role of the United States of America in our world. I think a lot of us are used to the fact that in our lifetime, the United States of America was a political powerhouse, a military powerhouse. Financially, we were the powerhouse. We carried a lot of clout. While we still have a lot more financial resources than most countries in the world, we do not carry the same financial clout we used to, and that's being evident now in commerce and industry. It's been in our lifetime that the United States of America, get this, in 10 years, in one 10-year span of time, the United States of America went from being the largest creditor nation in the world to the largest debtor nation in the world. And we continue to get deeper and deeper and deeper into debt. So one of the things is we don't have the same financial clout we used to have in this country. Politically, we don't carry as much influence as we used to. It's becoming more and more difficult to maintain allies or to acquire new allies. And I'm talking about in a secular sense right now, okay? What that means is that our image of the United States of America is changing around the world. And so therefore, there was a time 60 years ago, 70 years ago, when a missionary went from the United States of America and landed on foreign soil. Oh, you're the American. There was a degree of respect. There was a degree of admiration for that. But in today's world, a lot of that has changed. I follow soccer. I grew up playing soccer on the mission field. When I grew up, the kids I grew up with, we played soccer. We had a hard time understanding that football was this oblong-shaped thing that didn't even roll right on the ground. It just bounces and wobbles everywhere. And we said, that's not football. But, you know, for you SEC people, that's football. You got to have something that you can throw in the air, okay? So maybe we ought to call it handball. I don't know. But I grew up playing soccer, and so lately this summer there's been a lot of international soccer tournaments that are going on. So I'm telling you about the fact that we have changed in our country, and a lot of it is internal decay that's affecting our own image. It's not the fault of foreigners. So the other day, there was the European Soccer Cup going on, and right before the games, you know, you'd have the country of Italy playing the country of France. Before the game, the players are out there, the stadiums have people, and they play the national anthem of both teams. So the national anthem of Italy is played. All the players are singing, and they're patriotic. Same thing with France, same thing with England, same thing with all those countries that were involved in that tournament. Same thing happened. Simultaneously, there was a South American soccer tournament going on. Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Brazil. And they did the same thing. They're playing each other to see who would become champions. Argentina became the champion of the South America Cup. Italy became the champion 2 weeks ago of the European Cup. And they all demonstrated this. Right in that, they have what we call a friendly game. It's not an international competition. It's an international game, but they're not playing in a tournament. It's what they call tune-up games to stay on top of the game for a tournament that's coming up. And we've got the Olympics that are about to start. And so the United States women's team played the Mexican women's team. And so the Mexican team came to the United States. The game took place in Connecticut. And so before the game, you got to play the national anthem. They played the national anthem of the Mexican team first, and every single one of those girls sang as enthusiastically as they could. And they were panning this carefully and showing, and every one of those girls had their hand across their heart, showing great respect to their flag that was waving in Connecticut. They're doing it for this game, and they're singing. Now it's time for the American women to sing. I counted 2 girls singing. The rest of them were just kind of looking around. One girl that I knew was politically motivated, she just purposely ignored looking at the flag. She was scratching her face. One girl turned her back. As far as I know, 2 girls sang. Now, when we say that our image in the world is changing, we can't blame it all on the outside influences. I got so disgusted, and I'm a big soccer fan. I said, that does it. I'm not watching a minute of this stinking game. I turned it off. I said, I hope the Mexican team wins. Well, they lost, so I didn't hope much. But yeah, the American team has a good team. They are well known. The American women's team, that is. The men's team struggles. But in women's soccer, the American women's soccer, I guarantee you, they all made more money than any of those foreigners they've been playing against, and yet there was such disrespect, such ill want for our own nation. One of them in an interview said later on, she heavily criticized this country and how evil and how bad we are. And I wanted to say, go live in one of those other places and tell me about it 2 years from now. So why do I spend a little bit of time on this? Because, again, there was a time when, as an American, even a missionary would go over to another country and it would gain them a favorable status. Oh, you're the American. You can help us for the better, not just in the spiritual sense, but in the secular sense. You can help us. But anymore, that has changed. Therefore, when we send our missionaries as ambassadors of the gospel to the foreign field, we have to keep in mind that they no longer enjoy the benefit of being called an American citizen and that viewed as something positive. And so we have to keep that in mind, and we have to train the missionaries. Don't expect everybody to accept you and receive you with open arms. They may reject you, not because of the gospel, but because you are an American. Which brings us to this one interesting point. Our goal never has been to preach our country and our politics and our way we live. Our goal has always been to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. But we have to be aware of this. Let's go to one more thing. And I'm looking at this watch every little bit, so hopefully we won't go too far. How much time do I need to take? 5 or 10 more minutes? Okay. He said about another hour or two is what I heard, from just a couple of more minutes. And so we'll finish this up in my next session, I guess. Fifth thing we need to do is we need to embrace technology. Now, I think that's a very easy thing. I'm using today, for my notes, I'm using my mini iPad. If I get rid of this, I'll go to the big iPad. All right. But I can carry in this today. I've got scores and scores and scores of outlines. So I can preach all day long, Brother Tom. We can be here for the duration if you want to. Used to, when we'd go travel somewhere, we took notebooks and notebooks. The missionary going to the field today, in the old days, we would spend a lot of dollars to ship our libraries over there. Nowadays, we can use devices like this to take thousands of books to help us on the mission field as we train leaders and teach others. So technology has been a huge thing that I don't have to convince you it's positive, unless you're the kind of person that you have a dim view of technology. And I know that technology can be misused, it can be abused, but listen, it's like any other tool. We can either let the devil have full use of that tool, or God's people can get involved and say, hey, let's use this to our advantage. You think about it now. When I was a kid, when my dad came to Chattanooga to prepare to go to be a missionary and went to Bible school, and I was a little bitty kid, we'd sit in the auditorium of Highland Park Baptist Church because there were 3 TV cameras up there. And they would broadcast the service. And the kids, we would like to sit in the balcony because back then, those TV cameras were these long things. It looked like a bazooka. Is these long cameras. And if you could get behind it, and there was a guy, he was panning with the camera, you could see yourself upside down. It had an upside-down image. So all the kids wanted to get behind. So we're in the service singing the song, and the kids are trying to look over behind the camera, and our parents are pinching us, trying to get us back where we're supposed to be seated. And eventually they stopped broadcasting the service. It just became financially a great financial drain to do that, to live broadcast the service, thousands of dollars. Today with technology, you're able to use different platforms to get your message out to people live, or if they're traveling or if they're sick and can't watch it live, they can watch it later. I mean, technology has been a fabulous tool. You think about all your shut-ins that are not able to get out. It's been a great tool. I know that most people chafed under the restrictions of COVID, and we couldn't, and there was a time when we didn't have services, but thank the Lord for the technology. We were able to watch it on our computers or on our devices like this, and we were able to still worship and serve God. Technology has been a neat thing. Let me share something with you here. You're not going to be able to see it unless you want to come up and see this afterwards. I've got a picture sent to me by Manuel Verde. Manuel Verde, and I'm going to be sending a newsletter out in August about this. In August of 1980, I was giving out Gospels of John on a door-to-door effort with a bunch of young people from our church and ministry in Mexico. This is 1980. This was when I was young and had hair. And I came to this house, put a Gospel of John under the door. 6 weeks later, I heard from those people, because in every Gospel of John, there was a gospel tract, and then there was a coupon for a free Bible study course, but they had to mail the coupon in. We didn't even have a telephone back then. So there was a Gospel of John, a gospel tract, and a coupon. It took 6 weeks for them to get, and we were in the same city. 6 weeks for me to get that here. They came to church. They trusted Christ. They got baptized. Manuel and Carmen, his wife. 6 months after they were at church, he said, I think God's calling me to preach. We began to train him for ministry. He's been pastoring for several years now. He even has a missionary account with us at Global Faith. He is doing an extensive missionary outreach too. Not only is he pastoring, but he's got a great missionary outreach. Nobody with us has been able to use technology as extensively as he has. He is using social media. He's using YouTube. They have live broadcast of service every Sunday. They have discipleship courses, and he has an evangelistic outreach. 2 weeks ago, he started a new social media outlet for discipleship. And he said, Roy, I want you to look at this. And he sent back the feed that shows the results. In 2 weeks of this new platform, he's had 12,730 people that saw and got connected with that. And 799 people, just one short of 800, 799 people responded to him and reacted to that. Now, 42 years ago, it took 6 weeks for me to get a coupon from across town from his house to my house so I could take him a Bible study course. In 2 weeks, with the technology, he reached, on this one platform alone, 12,730 people, and that doesn't include the 3 other tools that he's using with technology. It is allowing us to do things that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we never thought we could have done. And so today we're seeing technology greatly used. I'll close with this. It's time for me to stop, so I will. I'll just treat this like a stick of bologna. We'll pick up the other trends when I come back next time. One of the funniest things is I still find it funny when I go down the Yucatan Peninsula and I go out to the little haciendas and the villages where they speak Maya. And I go out, and the Maya women are very short. And when they speak Maya, they go a mile a minute. And I still laugh when I'm going in those villages, and you'll see a little Maya woman now wearing her typical Indian dress, as they have for 500-600 years. And she's got one of these in her hand. And she's just walking down the street, and she's carrying a bowl of tortillas on her head, taking it to where she's supposed to go. And she's using technology. When I was there in Merida, there were not enough landlines to go around. And if you wanted a landline, you had to buy stock. Now, this is 1980. You had to buy stock in the Mexican phone company that was worthless if you tried to sell it. But to buy it, you had to buy at least $1,000, not pesos, $1,000 worth of stock to get a landline. Today, they have cell towers everywhere. And you've got Indians living in mud huts with mud floors and thatch roof, and they have these little Chinese imported phones that do everything ours do, and it has been a tremendous tool for sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ. What a great thing that we can do to embrace technology. And I'll just go ahead and stop here so I don't get kicked out. All right. It's been good to be here with you today. I thank the Lord for what you're doing, and I appreciate so much, Edie and I appreciate very much Miles Strait Baptist Church and the influence you have in our life and our ministry and all that you do to help us. God bless you. Pastor?